YouTube! Today we'll be talking about intersectionality. Okay, Kaylee, you've been talking around the subject for 5 videos now. What is it? Way ahead of you, YouTube. Let's take a trip under the sea. Meet Ariel. She's just your regular run-of-the-mill mermaid princess in love with a human. Unfortunately, Ariel's got a problem. Well, 2 problems actually, because she doesn't have legs. Ariel's identity as both a mer and a maid, a fish and a woman, means that her needs cannot fully be met by addressing the needs of only half of her. The tail part of Ariel needs the sea. It represents her heritage, her father, her sisters, and her friends, while the maid part of Ariel represents her burning desire to get with the prince, and fulfill her desire for knowledge or whatever. And in the 2 parts of the movie where she's required to reject one identity over the other, have you lost your senses completely? He's a human, you're a mermaid, and but if I become human, I'll never be with my fathers or sisters again. Shit hit the fan. And it really isn't until the end of the movie, and to some extent the less talked about sequel, where both of our identities come together and are recognized, that we see that stereotypical Disney happy ending. I see you're angling towards a point, Kaylee. Why don't you just make it? The inherent conflict of the Little Mermaid and Ariel's 2 conflicting identities of land and sea, and her existence as not belonging to just one or the other but both, is part of what we're talking about when we're talking about intersectionality. Intersectionality, simply put, is the idea that multiple social identities like race, class, sex, fish, exist and interact simultaneously within a person. And the idea that the different forms of oppression, domination, and discrimination that a person experiences are shaped and informed by their many identities. So basically, we can't look at Ariel as someone who belongs in the sea or as someone who belongs on land, but as someone who exists in between those spaces. Or, more to the point, when we're discussing systems of oppression like racism, sexism, and classism, we aren't just talking about the ways in which they work independently of each other, but rather how they work together and reinforce one another. It's about the ways in which privilege and oppression co-construct one another through multiple systems of inequality. Now, intersectionality as a theory has its origins in Black feminist thought. Now, there's some debate about when the concept got its start. Some people tracing it back to the Combahee River Collective, which was a Black feminist lesbian organization active from 1974 to 1980. But usually when you hear about the origins of intersectionality, you're going to hear about Kimberle Crenshaw, who coined the term intersectionality theory in 1989. The purpose of developing this theory, Crenshaw explains, was to illustrate that many of the experiences Black women face are not subsumed within the traditional boundaries of race or gender discrimination as these boundaries are currently understood, and that the intersection of racism and sexism factors into Black women's lives in ways that cannot be captured wholly by looking at the race or gender dimensions of those experiences separately. Meaning that Black women can experience sexism as a white woman might, racism as a Black man might, racism and sexism as 2 united forms of discrimination, and then discrimination as a Black woman. An identity in and of itself, not just a combination of the experiences of other marginalized groups. We all belong to or identify with different social categories that define and shape our lives. All of these have an impact not just on how we see ourselves, but how we are seen and treated. So think of it like this. If intersectionality was a bar fight, it's not so much a duel or a tag team match in which you're facing off with one opponent at a time, but rather a brawl in which one person could be getting the shit kicked out of them by many people all at once. Which is a dark way of describing it, but considering that Crenshaw's original metaphor described a person getting hit by multiple cars from multiple directions in an intersection, the concept kind of lends itself to morbidity. However, another popular and less violent way of conceptualizing intersectionality is Marilyn Frye's birdcage. The basic idea being that if you only look at one bar of a birdcage, and you only focus on that particular obstacle, you wouldn't be able to understand why a bird couldn't just fly around it. And even if you moved from one wire to another and examined each one individually, you still wouldn't be able to see how the bird wasn't able to escape. It's only when we take a step back and look at the cage as a whole that we can understand why the bird isn't able to go anywhere. The bars themselves are obstacles, but it's their relationship to one another that creates a cage, which granted sounds equally as depressing and is one of the main criticisms of the birdcage metaphor, as it makes it seem like escape is impossible and that combating systematic oppression is a waste of energy, which isn't true at all. The purpose of intersectionality as a theory is to first acknowledge the different ways oppressive structures and institutions overlap and reinforce one another, and second, to describe the ways in which intersectionally oppressed people mobilize against their marginalization, how they fight back. The problem with only focusing on one aspect of a person's identity is that we're not getting a full picture of their experiences. When we discuss oppressive systems like sexism and center gender as the primary way in which all of their experiences are interpreted, we're ignoring the complexities of not only the individual and their multiple identities, but the ways in which the intersection of their different identities create new forms and experiences of oppression. An example of this being the historical emphasis on the experiences of white women within the so-called women's movement and Black men in the civil rights movement, leaving Black women not completely represented in either discussion. Intersectionality attempts to look at all the ways in which our social and cultural identities interact and co-construct one another, and how these constructions create different experiences and forms of discrimination and oppression. And through a better understanding of how these systems interact, we have a better understanding of how to combat them. So it's not just about the oppression Olympics, but rather understanding the structures of society in order to make people's lives better. So yeah, that was intersectionality. I know that was a lot to throw at you, and we definitely didn't cover everything. So if you're interested in finding out more, as always, there are links in the description below. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them. My question for you this week is, how do you feel about the birdcage metaphor, and/or do you have a metaphor for intersectionality that better helps you visualize the concept? And that's it for this week. Next time we'll be discussing hegemony, so you know, patriarchy and the like. Get excited. But until then, happy unlearning.